Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who knows that there's nothing new under the sun, but that there are new suns.
Wow, nice. Tim Longo.
Thank you.
Yeah, on brand and multi-layered and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Three-dimensional, you might say.
Yeah. Okay. Well done. All right. Another layer.
It just keeps giving.
Yeah.
Just keeps giving. So we're welcome back to the new year. We had an episode last week, but this is us kind of starting off the new year proper with new year, new game, new phone, who dis. And we are going to kick off this year by playing Homeworld, the 1999 Relic 3D space RTS, which I was, you have a longer history with the RTS than I did. I played up to this. This was the last one I played.
Okay.
And I didn't finish it at the time. Started getting very difficult. Also, it was 1999, so we were in the second year and we might have been in the sort of transition to PlayStation 2, so work was busy. I'm thinking for Starfighter, that's kind of my recollection. I do definitely remember, though, playing this, getting to a point where I was like, wow, this is really hard, and then letting it go. But what is your history? Because StarCraft was the year before, just to set RTS history-wise.
Yeah. I have a vague memory of the difficulty you're talking about too. So I'm a little bit worried, even though there aren't that many missions overall. But yeah, the RTSes in this era could definitely get pretty grueling. And there's one of the topics I think we'll probably talk about today, or at least start to talk about with this particular game, has a really big impact on that problem. So we'll hit it later, which maybe, I don't know if you know or remember or noticed, but it'll be interesting to see because they didn't tutorialize you on it. So anyway, yeah, my history with RTSs, like it for a long time, and I would even say, like, I don't play them regularly now, but I would say I've never stopped being a fan. I just think there aren't that many out there these days. Total War is kind of like, is one, but kind of falls into its own unique area. So I think, some people would say, well, Total War is going strong, but I don't play those games. But yeah, no, I kept going, like Warcraft 3, StarCraft 2, especially. I would largely tend to stick to Blizzard RTSs at the time during this era. I think I played Homeworld 2 back then too, but yeah, I mean, it was like, it wasn't, it was a little bit like Quake for me, where, we would play StarCraft and StarCraft 2 wherever I was working at the time, PvP, we would spend, we would stay after work. And so I got kind of a little bit obsessed with the competitive nature of them too, especially StarCraft 1. We did a lot of things, tournaments and things. But Homeworld isn't really that, it's coming back to it. It's really interesting. I'm excited to talk about it because as I started the game back up, these sort of memories start flooding back in, and and that's where that music came from. That there's that, the right. Music. It's sort of like the Halo music, where it's like kind of in there someplace, and then you hear it. And you're like, oh, I thought that was from a TV show, but no, that's from this game.
Right. Yeah. Could well have been Battlestar Galactica.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which it superficially resembles. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was thinking when we started playing, not to jump ahead, but when the music kicked in, I was like, oh my gosh, I could have sworn that was from Battle. It's like I thought, did they steal this from a TV show? I was like, no, this just was cemented in my brain because this. Especially like you said, because it gets harder later, you hear this, you end up hearing things over and over and over again.
Yeah. Another thing about the era for sure. Okay. Well, I just wanted to kind of, ask, because, my own history, and we've played Warcraft on the cast, and that's, I think, the only RTS, straight up RTS we've played. and this kind of takes it in a new direction. We'll definitely talk about that. But mine basically my window was pretty short. It was Warcraft 2, StarCraft, and this. And this I didn't finish. I think those were all the ones I played, because that was the point. Like, I was returning to games when Warcraft 2 came out, and I was in grad school, and I was playing that, and then like Quake and Doom and stuff like that at that time, and then Diablo and let's see what else. Diablo and Quake and not much else. I'm trying to remember the games I normally cite, but then it was like, okay, I played this, and then I transitioned to consoles, and consoles are not a natural fit for RTSes because of just managing those large number of units. There wasn't really, it took a while for anybody to really crack that nut, and by then I was kind of no longer playing those sorts of games. So this is right at the time, that the PlayStation 2 was about to come out, and so I was kind of getting away from the PC. So I was getting away from games, from strategy games, really.
Yeah, you're not going to be playing RTSs at that point. Then there's actually another one that I forgot about that actually will be a little bit relevant to Relic later. Is Age of Empires is one that I played as well, and became big, and has had a bit of a renaissance. So of course that'll tie into Relic. Yeah, for me, the later ones that I would play that I would call RTSs, but that are definitely their own thing, were Pikmin and Brutal Legend. And in Pikmin, it's a very different mechanism and very guided in a totally different way. The concerns are very different. And then with Brutal Legend, the RTS parts are like they're like little exclamation points in the paragraph. They're not like the core gameplay that you're always doing. It's a very bizarre game. I still have no idea what that game is, I will admit, other than the PR material I've seen, marketing material.
Yeah, it's something.
Even though I was very close to it from knowing people and knowing
I know
Tim and stuff, but I just didn't. Yeah, I don't know why. I just never. I think I'm not really like a metal.
Probably part of their problem,
Yeah.
So, fair enough. Well, yeah, man, you don't have the hair.
I was back in the day, but not.
That's true. Yeah, I've seen those shots.
You gotta have the hair, and you had to fit into that.
You gotta be able to bang your head and have it swaying back and forth. Anyway, let's quickly set this in its time. This is 1999, as we mentioned. StarCraft had come out the year before. Some games we played on the cast, and I want to shout out to Johnny Pockets, who sent us a new timeline of our games.
What?
So
oh my gosh!
That'll be on the site. Yeah, it's enormous.
That is amazing.
It's super long. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for doing that. That is like a Christmas present all over again.
It really is. I forgot about it. Speaking of Christmas, I forgot about it beforehand. I think, we didn't have a couple episodes there, and so I wasn't doing the website and all of that stuff. And it came in December. Christmas came early, but now you get to unwrap it late. So that will hopefully be updated tomorrow when I post this. It's cool. I actually used it to pick out that we have played from this year System Shock 2. Try to do them in the order that we played them. System Shock 2, Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, Planescape Torment, and Shenmue.
Wow,
this is an interesting set of games to add.
That's my Luke. That's my Luke Wilson, or my own Wilson.
Wilson! Wow, it's pretty good.
That's a good set of games, man. This era, 98, 99, up to 2004 or whatever.
Yeah, terrific for games. And then some other games that came out this year. I should throw out the sort of tactical ones first. So Age of Empires 2. So that's a mix in this era. CNC, Command and Conquer, I should say, Tiberian Sun. Huge title. Westwood.
Yeah, I got that for whatever reason. I think compared to StarCraft, it's just the military side of it wasn't as interesting. So I did play Red Alert, but quite a bit. But that series I never got into, the Command and Conquer series.
Yeah, me either. And I mean, it's funny because I know most of what I know about Command and Conquer is from memes of Tim Curry. It's space. It's like that's all I really know. And then one final tactical game, which is not a real time, was Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri, which was
which I played and loved that as well. Yeah,
yeah, I did. I also played that. It's another one of. I mean, the thing with me in Civ style games is that I almost never actually finish a whole game. Certainly, rarely beat them. And I remember I have Smack downstairs somewhere on disc anyway. And then let's see. I just kind of grabbed a grab bag of other things to kind of indicate. We were at the end of the PlayStation cycle, about to go to PlayStation 2 the next year, I think. So Final Fantasy VIII came out in the West this year. Chrono Cross, which is it's a sort of sequel.
Yeah, how are you gonna?
I don't really know how to describe Chrono Cross because I don't really think of it as a sequel. It's just I don't know. Got some Chrono Trigger vibes, I guess. I don't really know. I haven't played it.
I've never understood.
I haven't played it since I played it in the
listening to you
2000,
try to explain it is hilarious. Yeah. But I've never
Yeah, I know it's not your
because it's not a real. It's a different. Yeah. Anyway, we shouldn't get into it. But
yeah, Silent Hill. Rayman 2, which is a great game. Someday maybe we'll play that one. I love Rayman 2, the Great Escape. It's one of the games I played on the PS2 because they ported it from, I don't know, I want to say Dreamcast to PlayStation 2 early, so it was one of the handful of titles that came out before Starfighter shipped. And then let's see here, Quake 3 Arena, Omicron: The Nomad Soul, the first Cage game with David Bowie, and then Asheron's Call I threw in here for you, the MMO.
Okay, yeah.
Did you play that one at all?
I did. Yeah,
okay.
not as rabidly as the others, but that one was. Yeah, it had its time.
Mm-hmm. It might still have its time. A lot of these games are still around.
Yeah. Well, they. I'm going to mess.
Oh,
this
they had
up.
a sequel, right? So they had.
Well, they did an Asheron's Call too, but that studio also, I think, either did D&D Online or Lord of the Rings Online.
I believe they did both.
Okay, well there you go. So Lord of the Rings Online, I played.
Turbine, right?
I played a lot of. Oh yeah, that's right. It was Turbine. Yeah, because we had a colleague from LucasArts who went to, who was one of our obsessed EverQuest players. With all of us, he actually went to Turbine and worked on, I believe on Lord of the Rings Online.
Who was that?
But I played a lot of Lord of the Rings Online as well, but not a lot of D&D.
Who was that?
Derek Flippo. Do you remember Derek Flippo?
Oh yeah, I remember Derek. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep. I don't think I ever worked closely with him, but I do remember I remember him being around. So
one of the funniest people yeah, he's like the driest humor you've ever met. But
cool. All right. Well, that brings us to Relic, which is where I pretty much hand it over to you because I'm not. Other than this, I'm really pretty unfamiliar with Relic. I have not played a lot of the games. Looking at the list of games, I was like, oh yeah, I knew about that game, right? Because of course this was my off ramp to RTSes.
Yeah. Homeworld. It's funny because I remember. Yeah, we'll talk about it more. But Homeworld, because it was such a unique proposition, I think a lot of people wanted to see what all the hubbub was about. Yeah. So Relic. I mean, this was its as we talked about in the pre-show. This was its debut game, and at the time, somewhat came out of nowhere. I don't know or have the history of the founders and the early team and where they were coming from before that. So I won't be able to hit that part. But from Relic's beginnings, the thing that Homeworld, I think, set a trend for them that I interestingly, and eventually Sega ended up buying them. And Sega, weirdly, that and Creative Assembly, they kind of ended up being the RTS publisher for some weird reason, like good for a long time and still are. So it's very odd turn of events. But they have always been known to me as a sort of, very fairly casual RTS fan, but like very much an RTS fan, that their games were always trying to do something against the norm, and the norm being, Blizzard, Blizzard games, Command and Conquer, Westwood games, and Ensemble games. Those are kind of, that's the sort of like the holy trinity, if you will, of the ones that were very consistent and very like known, I think. And there were some others like Total Annihilation and stuff that were vying for some of that, but didn't quite hit quite as big. But then Relic was, and it definitely started with Homeworld, and Homeworld definitely was the most different of the series that they initiated. Although I guess we can talk a little bit about Impossible Creatures, which is another experiment. But it really came out of nowhere. I think Homeworld, people just couldn't believe it. It's always nice to have those surprise hits in a certain genre, and especially when they're trying to do something very different, which we'll talk a lot about in this particular case, because they definitely were bucking the StarCraft or what have you, Warcraft trends here in Command and Conquer. But the interesting thing is, beyond that, they kept going. And even though the Dawn of War series, which I played, and the Company of Heroes series, which I played, even though those are still terrain-based, essential, like somewhat traditional cameras for RTSs, Dawn of War was very squad-based. Like, you didn't have a lot of units. You had a squad of, it was a little bit like a cross between StarCraft and an XCOM in a way. And I actually played that co-op as well. So, each of us had our own squads. And it was very interesting to play, a little bit like Warcraft 3 ended up being, because they had fewer units in some cases. So the heroes, and eventually that's where Dota came from.
Right.
And then Company of Heroes, also smaller scale, wasn't like hundreds and hundreds of units, but cool morale systems. And they really took World War II, strategy type games and did something different with it as well. Like line of sight was a big deal, and morale was a big deal, and tanks were like monsters.
The vehicles,
yeah,
the thing I remember. Also,
one
like
tank on a map.
The pathing for the vehicles was really cool. Like they did things like K turns and things like that, to turn around and stuff like that, which most units in these sorts of games never did. I mean, it just kind of turned on a dime, and they really made
it feel authentic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and terrain and height and the relief of the map was really important in those, and so they leaned into almost not really simulation, but almost like really feeling like a World War II battle. I don't know if they were
maybe more like a miniatures game,
totally.
That was totally a thing, right, for them. I mean, the
Warhammer,
elaborate ones, Warhammer,
yeah, Dawn of War. It was very much like playing a miniatures game. And Dawn of War, I think, is still considered to be some of the best Warhammer 40K stuff in video games. And I don't know if they were inspired or not, but some of the things that they did with the Company of Heroes games I could see some lineage coming from Myth in a way, where some physics and like terrain mattered, and it was more three-dimensionally, kind of simulated and stuff like that. So even though Myth, I don't think is up there too high on the sort of like epically memorable RTSs, but definitely unique from Bungie.
Yeah.
But
in fact, that's one I forgot to mention. That's another one that I played.
That you played. Yeah, we did talk about that when we played. I think.
We've mentioned that before for sure. And Myth 2. I played both of them. So my ending with Homeworld might not be accurate because I'm not sure when those came out.
I would have thought Homeworld would have come out after, but I don't remember. Maybe
maybe straddled it. They're definitely around the same time. In any case, I may have played this last, even though it may have come out in between, just because I was really into I really liked Myth. I'm surprised I forgot that because I was really into the Myth games. I'm not sure I finished them either, to be honest. I mean, there was definitely
I don't think I did.
I was definitely drifting away, and they're difficult. They're very formation based, extremely like you really want to know your formations when you're setting up your units in that game. It's hugely important. So I think that was not
every unit mattered.
Yeah, that's not something I was really. Yeah, of course you weren't making new units. Yeah, that was the other thing too.
I think
right?
that'll come into play here too when we talk about Homeworld. But yeah, and I think Myth it's a good example too of the era, because even Bungie was, and as we talked about in our Halo series, that Halo started out as an RTS of sorts,
right.
And so RTSs were one of the big genres at the time, right? Like FPSs, right? And now they've kind of, who knows where they went? They're definitely percolating out there, and there's some new projects that are coming and things, and people are still trying to keep that genre alive, but it's not what it used to be, not at this time. And so Homeworld coming out was
it's a genre that never really grew, right? I mean, it's like a lot of genres grew their audiences as we transitioned to larger audiences, and some just never grew, and I'm tempted to use that phrase you love, whenever we talk about strategy, grognard capture, because it's the sort of thing that happens with these games that are super crunchy. Is like there's a dedicated audience who loves them, but they want them to get harder and harder and harder, right? And they want them to be just crushingly difficult to other mortals, right?
And then they alienate,
exactly, and then it's impossible. And actually, sitting down to play this, I was like, oh, this doesn't have a difficulty setting. I was like,
I made that note too. Yeah,
is this a game I'll not finish? Add to the wall of shame for Brett, because I know I haven't finished it in the past. I'm not terribly embarrassed. I wear my shame proudly at this point.
No, but I am, and I need your list to be longer so I can.
Okay. I see. You're begging me not to finish. Got it. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, RTSs were notoriously, on the business side, as games were growing, like they were a huge, one of the top 3 or 5 genres, right? That every company was trying, especially because of Blizzard's influence, and Westwood's a little bit too, that everyone was trying to emulate that. And so those were being greenlit, et cetera. And when the medium in the industry was at its height at that time, that was enough to justify the project. But then as things like the Calls of Duties and all of those started to blow up, and every game and the games industry was starting to blow up even bigger, the expectations got higher. But to your point, RTS's audience numbers stayed the same. Basically, They would hit a ceiling. I remember having this conversation with somebody, I think, because there were some internal RTSs that were made at LucasArts at the time. There was a Age of Empires Galactic Battlegrounds.
That's right.
That a colleague of ours worked on. Yeah. And then there was a 3D one. There was Force Commander and a lot of other things experimenting. So there was always the talk of like, what's the total addressable market for these games? And statistically, it was just like, there was a max, it's like, well, as the budgets go up, if that max doesn't change as far as audience, then they're not going to get greenlit.
Part of the attraction too, I think, is that it was a game where you could, you'd make a campaign, but then the real heart of it would be, as you've kind of already alluded to earlier, there would be the online component, and there's some interesting stuff I guess we could talk about when it comes to that. Typically these games were lockstep. Well, I mean, maybe I should hold that off till we actually want to talk about, maybe we'll talk about multiplayer. It'd be fun to play multiplayer. I'm sure you'd wipe my solar system with me, but
I don't know.
I just haven't played RTSs.
This is a weird one though. Yeah, this is a weird one for that. Yeah. 25
years since I've been playing RTSs. I might have some trouble, with the exception of Warcraft. But the point being that because modems had become a thing in the early 90s, and the internet and the web had become a thing, LANs were something people were becoming comfortable with, and then actually playing online, especially with things like Diablo or Quake, you ended up having this market of people who wanted to play games with other players, and they're basically meant you don't have to make the AI impossibly great, on these games, and you can kind of use traditional techniques of like, throw more units, give the AI all kinds of advantages. Of course, they can see the whole map all the time, whatever, because the campaign was just the warm up for the multiplayer, which was where these games typically had their longer life, right? I mean,
some of the earliest, if not, I don't know if it's fair to say this, but I would say potentially the earliest esports that ever existed were RTSes.
Sure, StarCraft in Korea,
StarCraft
in particular,
specifically. Yeah, that's where it's like, oh, this could be a thing, right? Because it was so popular and competitive.
Yeah, I remember our colleague Andrew Kermsey had gotten, I think it was Andrew who had gotten a book about learning English from StarCraft that was printed in Korean.
Yeah.
It was like, it was that bit, and it wasn't translated to Korean. It was all in English. And that was the game that kind of really, really broke out there. It's also the one I played the most of all the RTSs I played. But we already played the Blizzard one. It's fun to play something different. Yeah.
Well, and then not only that, but in this case, to bring it back to Relic and Homeworld, setting the scene for RTSs at the time, along comes this game that doesn't have terrain.
Yeah.
And tries to solve the 3-dimensional problem at the same time out of nowhere. And also, we've kind of forgot to mention, there's also, like in the Venn diagram, there's also space games, space flight games of some kind. We played TIE Fighter, but there's a lot of others that were out there. And, Battlestar we mentioned.
Descent Free Space.
Descent, Free Space, there's the Wing Commander and all of its series,
Colony Wars on the
Free Space. Yeah, that was another genre that was still kind of alive and doing well, just, separate from even the Star Wars stuff. And so, this game, Homeworld, is a very interesting, I think, convergence of various things that were popular at the time. And I think, those sorts of space games, and there's still some around, obviously Star Citizen and stuff, and Elite, but
and Squadrons.
Yeah, Squadrons. Yeah. So this is an interesting combination, even though it at its core it's an RTS, but both the story and the tone and the feel of it, feels also like a space sim to me sometimes. And you're just in a space, you're just in a starfield, you're just in a space skydome. And,
right.
And so it's like, I didn't intend to make this stupid pun, but it is a relic of its own.
Oh, boy.
There
it is, folks. And it wasn't even me this time.
And I don't mean that in like an antiquated way. I mean, it's like it is an artifact. It's like it's a snapshot of something, I think, very magical, where a team was trying to look at the space, look at the genre, and it's very much the what if we were to do this. And for me, being a fan of RTSs and space games and space in general, and and kind of management-y kind of stuff, and it just like checked all the boxes, and it was just. But it does. You're reminding me how hard it gets, so I'm a little worried.
Yeah.
But there was. I think this is a little bit of hyperbole, but there wasn't a sense at the time of nobody really knows how to tackle the 3D problem with an RTS. And that's where I think this was like, oh, have you played Homeworld? They figured it out, or they at least got close, So.
Right. No, I mean, I think they did figure it out. We can kind of start turning it to that now. I mean, I guess maybe not entirely. I mean, the one thing I do think, it makes me think of Wrath of Khan. He betrays a certain two-dimensional thinking because a lot of it does feel like it happens on a plane.
They rely on it a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And because they basically have a separate mode to specifically like the assumption is you're on the same plane. If you tell your units to go somewhere else, the assumption is you want them to go somewhere else on the same plane that they're on, and you have to go to a different view to kind of elevate or lower them, which feels, unless of course they're attacking something, I guess those could be coming from another plane. It's really funny because of course,
I think you'll see as time goes on when they start design the ways they design the missions that they start to try to push
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've we should probably set set expectations. I've played, I guess, two main missions, and I played the tutorials because I knew I was not going to, pick up and run with this one. So
I did
took
too.
a bunch of notes.
Right. I played the tutorial and then 3 missions. So only one more. And I'm not saying they pushed that in the missions in those 3 missions. I think. My
recollection is they do. Early on they're kind of like, we're going to tell you about this thing, and in the tutorial especially, but you're not going to really have to worry about it. And I was, I specifically wrote down like how to elevate, because I was like, I'm going to forget this. Like, this is a classic thing that they teach you, but then you don't have to know for, another couple of hours, and you're going to forget it if you don't write it down. In fact, I already was looking at the control list at some things like, what am I doing? My natural inclination is to do this, but that's not how things work in this game. So let me go look. What am I supposed to do again? Right. So
it is tricky because they don't have all the same conventions that a StarCraft would. So because they I mean, that's the other thing about Relic. I put Relic a little bit into like, what's a good analogy? Because in the FPSs, right, there started to become some norms that everyone just kind of adopted. I mean, even WASD and mouse look, right, became sort of like, okay, everyone's doing this now. There were some holdouts for a while, but eventually everyone was like,
no, this is
how
keyboard only.
Yeah, right. But Relic was definitely one of the ones where they did and this is a bit of a generalization, but they often tried to do what was right for what their goals in their game was, right? Rather than saying, oh, well, Blizzard does it this way or Westwood does it this way, we're going to do it the same way. So it doesn't, the skills don't transfer exactly all the time in every case, for hotkeys especially, but which is an important part of
a good example would be, Halo and everything after it versus
that's a
GoldenEye 007. It's like, there's nothing like that. I mean, different controllers, so cut them some slack. But yeah, I mean, there was first person shooters on, or anything that was first person, even if it wasn't a shooter, on a console before Halo, all of which were trying to figure out what to do. A lot of which were like, well, use the left stick and then hold down R1 if you need to turn, right? Types of things, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, control yourself in 2D, then hold this other button to turn yourself.
We even talked about it with Metroid Prime, right?
Yeah, with Metroid Prime and with, but also with these are third person games like Resident Evil games, of the time, where like tank controls and, just figuring out
RE4,
control characters in 3D was a whole thing. So there's definitely, I guess, divergent evolution and then survival of the fittest, which are kind of happening in these genres at the time. And that's the kind of analogy there. Well, let's turn to the game itself. We kind of definitely set it in its time, and what they were trying to do. I had forgotten. We're both, I think, playing the remastered edition. I actually had it. I had picked it up at some point on GOG. I think I probably thought, oh, that's on sale this week. We'll probably play that someday. So thanks, past me.
I forgot to even check. I hope I didn't get it there.
It's possible. I mean, it's also possible I just like they have weird sales on GOG. Sometimes they're like, you can buy a game now for $1, but it's random. So maybe I got it that way. Who knows? They have these weird things that they do. But we're both playing the remastered edition. It is really beautiful. It's a really beautiful game, and of course, with the remaster, one of the nice things about that is, of course, they just have to render space. So huge sky dome, and then they can spend some they can spend all their polygons basically on, their ships, and so their ships can be really, really nice. And then they can fall back to lower level of detail really nicely, because you're not going to mostly be close up on them. But when you are close up on them, you won't be able to see any other ships because space is really, really big. So there's like a lot of really, really nice things that happen there just from a presentation standpoint. Of course, in the remastered edition, it's like you can turn on every bell and whistle. I think this is one of those games that was sort of a graphics benchmark for a while, because there were so many things you could turn on. You can turn up the resolution quite a lot, and
it was like Space Sims in that way.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like you can turn on all these things that your graphics card could probably do, and see what the frame rate is. So it was like a 3D benchmark, and even though I know it looks way better now than it did when I played it, I still have the sense that it looked amazing when I played it. In 1999 or probably 2000 when I actually played it. So
I did look up at a couple screenshots of the original just to kind of quickly compare. And I think the remastered, at least that I bought, I think I got it on Epic because it was on sale for like $3 or something.
Right.
It's usually like 30. But I think you can play the original.
Right, yeah, the originals in the GOG edition as well. Yeah.
But I think to your point, it's actually one of what you were just talking about is one of my macro points that I think we'll come back to time and time again. But I think Homeworld is a really great example of how do I want to call it? Like economical game development, or like, we talk about constraints a lot and leaning into where where you're flexible and where you have the capacity to do certain things. And if you look at the original screenshots, it reminded me that, there's a real elegance to their ship designs. But you can also see the polygons, but they work for the aesthetic of the game, especially the mothership. It's right. Like, it's a really like simple shape. It's a really simple design. It's very memorable, and it's also low poly, and all the ships are that way. They just had really great silhouettes, generally. And I think the remaster, I feel like, I don't know if this is true, but I'm wondering if the remaster didn't actually fool with the polygons much. They just fooled with the textures and the materials and things and the shaders, maybe. I guess.
Probably some tessellation, to make them, make them hardware. Polys. Yeah, the base polys probably haven't changed, but or may not have changed. I mean, you don't have to. Like, if something describes a curve, which is what the leading edge of the mothership does, you don't actually need that many control points. You can just interpolate, and that's been around for a long time. In fact, a colleague of ours at LucasArts did hardware tessellated triangle interpolation. That was Eric Johnston. Had done that for the PlayStation 2 on the VUs, right? I mean, just vector units. Sorry, throwing out other stuff that I remember from the time. But yeah, you can just do that. I mean, if you have like this handful of points and it's a curve, then you can kind of tessellate it as much as you want and make that curve basically perfect. As long as you have the throughput on the hardware to do it. So I could see that. Like, I could see that they stayed with the same model and said, "Hey, these are hard. These are flat, and these are curved," and then just tessellated the curves. That would totally make a lot of sense. But yeah, I mean, I remember that leading edge of the curve being, not a lot of polys, but at a distance it reads curved. And most of the time you're looking at it at a distance, in this game.
Yeah, and you need to see those silhouettes, right? And that's also, obviously an RTS unit design thing, that certain games have different requirements. Like in something like StarCraft, color becomes really important as well as shape, because you have so many things clashing together, right, and all that kind of stuff. But the other thing that other RTSs wouldn't have to deal with, obviously there's a 3D aspect, but to your point about it being in space, it's like, which is another, it's funny because when I was in QA on X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, or around some of the folks at at Totally Games, seeing the editor of how the X-Wing and TIE Fighter games were made, it looks a lot like this game, the editor, because you're scripting squadrons of things in a 3-dimensional space field, star field, and it looks kind of like an RTS in a way. And so the concept of, spending your budgets on things like contrails in this game, which end up being almost more important than the ship themselves, because that's where you see the momentum and the direction and the color, of course, as well. So it's just, they're different kind of problems to solve, but also different interesting solutions, because the context is completely different than another game. And the background is not grass or dirt or rock; it's black space. So it's like a whole different. And I'm sure that they were influenced by Space Sims in that regard, because we worked on some stuff in that space, and things like contrails are really important to show all sorts of things, directionality and speed, and and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. The dynamics of a space. It's funny you're talking about that, and I'm also thinking, like, they use a lot of things that were very common in graphics of the time, like using a lot of lines, to indicate things. Like, for example, when you select, you're using a box, right? You're using a box that's on your screen, that would be renderable in the 2D Windows API. And then you're doing lines, same thing. When that you say, oh, I'm going to have these guys attack this guy. They're doing a lot of those as sort of UI elements that are 2D elements, single pixel width, that you would do actually as an overlay. You would render it as a separate sort of thing. It's funny because those are things that graphics APIs actually don't even do anymore. You have to do them as polygons. It's funny how far the hardware has changed.
Wow. How
funny. It's like you can't draw a line anymore, like you used to be able to. Most
why
there's an API for it, like, but the reason is that the cards are so focused on 3D that 2D is such a pointless special case that you just do it as 3D. And then lines specifically, which are pixel width lines, are like a whole thing that they just don't do. Like, it's usually I don't even know if the OpenGL, which is a graphics language specification, I don't even know if that still supports lines, but it used to, and it graphics cards basically had to emulate it because it wasn't. They weren't actually drawing lines anymore. So it's really funny. It's kind of also in this place where all these things that they're doing that are space related, they're also doing these weird things that are kind of very specific to PCs of the time. You still wanted to do this on your main chip and this other stuff on your graphics card. I don't know, just something about that made me think of that.
No, that's really cool. Yeah. I mean, and to your point, I forgot to mention when you're talking about the plane and sort of this pseudo, it's 3D, and the camera definitely, and I guess we'll talk about this in a bit or maybe next time, but
probably next time at this point.
I would like to give them the benefit of the doubt on this, that there's a wisdom, especially when you start this game, to actually give a sense of a 2D plane, at least for a while, right? Because people coming in are going to be coming off of, essentially 2D RTSes, and you don't want to, you want
to alienate them.
You want to overwhelm them, and again, not to kind of call back to X-Wing and TIE Fighter games or even Rogue Squadron games. They're space games, but and I guess I'll say Starfighter games as well. There is always, even in the space missions, there is always a sense of, here's your battle plane. Here's where the Star Destroyer is. It's on the main quote unquote invisible plane, and everything is going to kind of be related to that. In Starfighter, there were times when we tried to play with that to really lean in, because we were,
especially I would say, Jedi Starfighter.
Yeah, we were more in our, we were more trying to push the space sim part of, even though we were a console game, push the space sim design elements than say Rogue Squadron would, or that were maybe a little bit more movie focused, for better or for worse. And so we would have enemies come from above you or something. So you had to actually really think about it that way, to a point. But this game will definitely start doing that. And as a quick note, because you mentioned multiplayer, one of the my memory of multiplayer in Homeworld, one of the key things is to win is to think that way, to think three-dimensionally, and to catch people off guard because you're coming at some weird angle,
oblique angle.
Yeah. And you're like, oh wow, I didn't
like James Tiberius Kirk.
Exactly. That's how you beat Khan.
That's right.
Yeah.
He doesn't know you're going to come shooting through the front of your ship from the top. He just doesn't expect it. He's got a seafaring mind and not a spacefaring mind. Yeah. I guess we should at least touch a little bit on the gameplay. We've kind of talked about our RTSs generally. The tutorial is very focused on, as it should be, how do you steer the camera and how do you select and direct your units. I mean, that's pretty much the game for an RTS, right? Is, selecting and directing your units, and seeing what's going on. And this is, I feel like this game is missing some other additions. I feel like
there's resource management. Well, there is one. So,
I
guess I'll ask now then, because I think we'll get into it more next episode. But I will ask the question now.
Yeah.
What is your and this isn't meant to be a trick question, but I was surprised that they didn't, that I noticed at least, overtly explain it to you. But what is your sense of resources in this game and unit persistence in this game? Do you remember all that?
They all go into the ship and they go with you to the next level.
Yeah. And that is a fundamental difference to most RTS games.
And in fact, now that you say that, I'm like, oh shoot.
Yep.
That
did you
meant
leave resources behind?
I did not. Well, I might have in the second mission. I definitely did in the first mission, but in the second mission, I might have. And you never want to do that. I totally forgot that was.
You never want to do that. Yeah, I mean, if you're min-maxing, right? They've balanced it in such a way where I don't think you have to, but it's going to behoove you to. So mine everything you find, and then build as you go, right? And there's also a max, I believe, to what the mothership can carry. So you won't be able to just keep building for the end of the game. You got to kind of replace inferior ships with a better ship, kind of thing, because it takes up a slot.
You can also reclaim them.
You can, yeah.
So there is actually a good mechanic of okay, well, I had scouts, but now I've got interceptors. I can just get rid of the scouts. There's also speed and weight trade-offs, and it's pretty deep. Yeah.
It's pretty deep, yeah. And I only brought up the persistence aspect of it because it's so unique. And to your point about there's a basic sort of sensibility to the game as far as RTSs go, because it is fairly simple in those sorts of ways. But I do think the persistence aspect of it, though, I just forgot about all this stuff until we started playing. I love the fact that is a design mechanic that changes the way you play mission to mission, but it also relates to the story of the game and the theme of the game. Because you have it's Battlestar, basically. You have a finite number of people and resources, and you have to bring them all home. It's like you're trying to get as many people as you can alive, which the mission you're about to start is a bit
they're destroying. It started playing, and they're destroying the cryo the cryo or something. Yeah,
cryo plates or something. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I have a note about that too, because they have some great animations with that. But just very simple and elegant. It's a very elegant game, which everyone knows I love to use that word too much. I just love elegant design and in every way. But yeah, anyway, the persistence thing I think is going to keep coming up, and I think it's a fascinating and very bold, and also makes the game hard toward the end.
I made a note of it, and in fact, I remember how harrowing that could be. Like that you're trying to hyperspace out, and you've got there's one unit out there who's like, oh man, I really like it if that unit could get home. Maybe not all of them, but there's like this one there. You're like, oh, it'd be great to have that Corvette, or whatever it is.
It's a little XCOM-y too, right?
Yeah, totally forgot that. Yeah, exactly. Because they're kind of, they don't actually level though, right? I mean, they're just
no, they don't. I don't think they level, but they. I think if you get them home,
they may heal.
If you hyper them out, they do gain. Yeah, so you don't want one to get destroyed, but it's okay if it gets almost near death, and then you bring it in. I'm pretty sure, but there also are repair craft, but I think that's more mid mission.
Right? Yeah, no, that's definitely what that's for. I already built one of those and put it out there, and didn't really know how to use it, so that's a thing. I'm not sure it works real well with the small ships. It might be better for cruisers and stuff.
I didn't use it yet.
Yeah, I made one, because why not? Let's. I'll have to remember that. I don't know. There's things like that, that I always worry about now that we, after we talked to Julian Gollop about their difficulty management, that I'm just like, do I want to do that? Is it going to punish me for being, such a min-maxer? But now I'm like, do I want to replay the second mission?
Yeah, I don't think you have to do that, but it's something to keep in mind. I think at least because it's not. I don't think it's the way to win to have the most resources, but I think because you can always use tactics and strategy to win. But I think to going back to your point about like the basics of the input and stuff. I for this first episode, I definitely wanted to mention like every time a mission starts. Or really, I guess after every cutscene of some kind where they take control away, they always like frame the camera in an interesting place. It looks cool and very like spacey and very epic. But the first time they do that, and I guess it would be in a tutorial that I would have experienced this time. And then they tell you how to use your camera, and they have this great fleet commander voice or fleet. I forget what they call it.
Yeah, fleet commander.
Fleet commander. Yeah, because she's that scientist that literally put herself in the ship. Yeah. So it's a little very Halo in that way, but there's
I couldn't give her any comfortable clothing. It had to be super skin tight. I noticed.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Halo wasn't out yet, so I had so many notes about Halo.
Yeah,
but oh my gosh, yeah, it's not
5
Halo.
years. Yeah. It's
2001.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was thinking it was like right before Repcom, but it was definitely not.
yeah, it was 2000. Yeah, it was that. But what I was going to say is the first time that she tells you, and it's very StarCraft in that way. The voice is great, and she's very calm, and you get this very Battlestar epicness to it of like, lots at stake. But the first time she explains how to use the camera, and then the first time you move it, because I'm like, oh, this is an RTS, cool. Oh, there's some 3D thing, and then you go in, and then you move the camera, you rotate it around in 3D space. And you get a different angle of the mothership, and you're like, "What just happened? Yeah. What did this?" It's like revelatory, right? Because it's like, how did they do it? That was my memory, at least. It's just very magical, and it definitely later will become terrifying because you're really like, "Oh my god, where are the people who are getting attacked, and how do I get to them?" and where's the camera? And so it's a lot of management, but it's still magical.
Yeah, and what I end up wanting is like a pause to move the camera. That's the thing I want most of all. Is like a Baldur's Gate style pause and figure out what's going on.
Totally.
Not because I want to turn base it, but literally just so I can figure out where things are. Although that drawn out view is really good at that. I mean, it does show everything. You can see lots.
Yeah, that's pretty handy. Yeah.
So if you go out to that and you can, assuming you have things assigned, we'll get to all these sort of mechanics later because it does have a lot of things that weren't in, or at least I didn't rely heavily on in Warcraft, like formations. I don't think were in Warcraft, but just like group selection and things like that, and assigning numbers and. Those were things that happened. I did a lot in Warcraft 2, but not so much in the first one, if they were indeed even a thing. And then, the whole thing with the ship being your you gotta carry your resources forward. Man,
it's a weird. It's so yeah. It's such a. But I think it's when it comes to pillars of this franchise, I think it's a Homeworld thing, right? Like it's like it's one of their unique things. But the other thing I'll mention and then from just a high level before we
then we can go to email maybe.
It's just to pay attention to as we play is that I had forgotten about is the flight modeling and the space physics is Star Wars, what I'll call Star Wars based versus Battlestar based, meaning that the ships are flying as if they're in the sky,
like World War II ship,
like World War II, and and again, that's what StarCraft or Star Wars chose to do for George, because again, it was based on a lot of World War II movies and stuff. But Battlestar, like I don't know if there's a Battlestar RTS space RTS out there in the world game. I guess I should look that up, but it would be super interesting to me to
working on one, but I don't know if it was. Maybe it was the MMO. Wasn't there going to be a?
There was an MMO, yeah, but I don't know if there was space combat or what. But I just would be really interesting to see a game like this that had more of a quote unquote realistic space flight model, where you can turn on a dime and I think the show, Battlestar show, the reboot show, did a great job at those space battles because it wasn't like a Star Wars space battle like this is. It was like, oh, I'm going to go right by you and then turn around 360 instantly and shoot at you kind of thing, which is super neat. Because that space is like you're in space. Why not leverage that?
Right, yeah, use the fact that
But here it's like they got to do a flyby and then turn around and it takes forever. And
right, yeah. Yeah, this definitely feels like TIE Fighter in that regard, that the bombers have their run, and you don't want to turn, have to turn because they'll never be able to do it. It's pretty funny. Interesting note about that. Starfighter had it had gravity in one direction. I was thinking about this earlier when you were mentioning, it was a space game with a 2D plane, and it did because gravity was always Z down. And then Jedi Starfighter, we actually made it gravity was to a point. Or it was down, but it was possible because we had that one asteroid mission.
That sounds about right. That one mission, we had to bomb to the center of the world, right? To the center of this asteroid. Wow. I would
thank
never
you, Troy.
That.
Thank you, Troy Mashburn. Because of course that was Troy.
Boy, the number of times you've said that in your career. Thank you, Troy Mashburn.
Thank you, Troy Mashburn. Yes, all 7 years while I was at LucasArts. Anyway. But yes, good times. All right, let's turn to some email. We have a lot more to talk about. We barely scratched the surface on the game itself. I have notes from these first levels that we might.
We'll come back. I think we'll come back to the first levels. Next time.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think there's a lot. The microcosm is there. And the presentation of the story, which was way better than I thought. Because that's kind of my recollection of the time as well. It's like, okay, StarCraft was a real leap forward for storytelling. I didn't expect this to have the storytelling that it does because I totally forgot. Like I said, I've got a mouse's brain for games, memory wise. So let's go to email. These were sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. Let's at least do yours. Maybe we'll have time for mine.
Okay. I have two.
Start with one and then we'll.
Oh yeah, maybe we'll do three. Okay. Yeah. Subject, bad video games. All right, love it. Johnny Pockets. Good day, gentlemen. In the first Trespasser episode, there was a thing on Discord about this. You guys asked the audience what we thought of playing games like Trespasser that are not quote-unquote great/classic games and might cause some pain. I support this move. So did Bio, or was it? No, it might have been Belmont, but I feel it opens a bunch of interesting topics and debates, especially as it is more likely to split opinion. It is also fun to hear about deadly apex predators like tree, hill, or box. Couldn't even finish the sentence. I hope you continue playing games like this. Question for Trespasser. What would Trespasser look like if it were released in 2024? Best Johnny. Funny you should say that. Did I say this on air or did I tell you this offline? where I want to do a remake in Unreal.
Oh yeah. You were
5 of Trespasser.
I don't remember if that was on air or not, but yes, I remember.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it with all its glory. Yeah, this
what he means, folks, is he's going to design it, and I'm going to have to do the code for him because he's not going to know what the heck he's doing.
Can you do a procedural animation system?
Do you have a little time this weekend to just kind of throw together in Unreal?
I want the dinosaur to trip down the hill just like they did. Anyway, this came up on Discord. People brought it up, and there's definitely people want more of this. Sorry, Brett. Trespasser. I knew Trespasser was going to be worth it. Yeah. I made the point, though, in Discord, and also to plug Discord a little bit, our Discord channel, or Discord server. Discord, I made the point on there that I will make here, too, that I don't think it's as simple as just playing bad games, because there are plenty to pick on those. I forget how I put it in Discord, but I think for me, the point of Trespasser was that it ended up essentially failing, and it is a bad game, kind of like technically, but the point for me was that they were swinging for the fences.
Right.
And you could see what they were trying to do, and that they were probably just too early in trying to do it.
And so too ambitious, really.
Too ambitious, yeah. And so I think it's finding not just bad games, but games that were doing that as well. Like something that was like, man, they just did not stick the landing, but they sure tried. So when that came up on Discord, I started thinking about it. I was like, man, what is that list? It's not just the worst game I played kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. It would be hard to figure that one out. I mean, it really would be. I mean, because this one really lodged in your brain. So the thing is you would have had to see through at the time, like the reviews to the core, that there was something there that interested you. Right. And I know that,
it's the good, bad games, right?
Exactly.
It's like good, bad movies.
Our friend Reed is really good at like finding these gems that he's like, oh yeah, this is not fun to play, but
he has the patience.
And he looks for those things that are like, this is a game that's got like really, actually, I think what he looks for, and this might be the thing to look for, is like, this is a game that everybody hates, but like 3 people champion, of your critical list, right? And those 3 people, like, they're like, oh yeah, this is terrible. However, I sort of feel like Dragon's Dogma was that a little bit. It was like a game that didn't. I mean, it took a while to connect with people, but when it came out, people were like, "What is this? This is not my traditional fantasy thing. I don't like it." But a lot of game developers looked at it and thought, "Oh, that's kind of cool." I mean, we played it at Bethesda. I remember somebody bringing it in and showing it and being like, "Yeah, this game is jank, but." Watch this, so it had that kind of cool factor. I mean, for me wasn't the question about like what would be the
what would Trespasser look like in 2024?
Yeah, I don't know that there would be I think
it's an immersive sim.
But it's like it wouldn't be those technologies, right? I think the parallel would be something like, okay,
it's want survival.
Well, you want D&D. You want a D&D game that is a visual D&D game, like a 3D Dungeons and Dragons game, but everything is made by an AI on the fly. That's like the shooting for the stars, kind of like moonshot. Like it's a different tech that we're concerned with. I think it's because their tech, that they were trying to figure out was basically real time physics and procedural animation, and behavior. Right? I mean even the behavior stuff I think would have been pretty easy to do. But I think of like Black and White is like a more successful moonshot game.
Black and White's a good example of what we were just talking about.
Yeah. It's a game that really shot for the moon. Yeah. I mean, they didn't really know how to take what they had and make it really fun, because it kind of gets old after like the 3rd mission. You're like, okay, I'm done.
What a weird game.
Yeah. It's kind of RTSE too, actually.
Yeah.
So it's another sort of RTS I played, but it's really more of a God game. But there's a lot of RTS elements in how you use the creature. Yeah, I mean, I think it's something like that where it's like, here's a tech that can't really do the thing. You can squint and you're like, someday it's going to be able to do this thing. And I mean everything. Like the AI just does everything. Like it does the art. It's like, I could even imagine it being like a virtual tabletop game like we play, but like literally everything's on the fly by an AI. Like, so you see your characters and they don't have the right number of fingers, and they, the decoration doesn't look consistent. Like the tokens that it puts down for dressing the area look strange. Like it doesn't fit. But you're like, yeah, but 10 years from now, somebody's going to actually crack this nut, or 20 years from now, or whatever, something like that. I think is the thing.
Nice. You went in a different direction than I did.
I know you want to make Trespasser today and just I
think about voxels a little bit too, and
that's another good one actually. Yeah.
Yeah, and the closest thing I can think of, because I haven't played Ark. Of course, it's a survival game that is about dinosaurs, I guess. But I have played a lot of Valheim, and so I think about like an immersive sim crossed with Valheim or something with just dinosaur ecosystem. To your point, it's all procedurally generated, seed based. There's an ecosystem, so the dinosaurs are preying upon each other, and you're just kind of dropped in the middle of it, and it's got immersive sim rules and survival rules. And then there's probably some set pieces with some puzzly kind of stuff. But yeah, that's an interesting.
I think what Trespasser really needed, for a modern version is like more ecology. It's like you only have a handful of dinosaur types. Like you don't actually have a full on ecology of like really tiny dinosaurs all the way up to, Brontosauruses, Brachiosaurs, and T-Rex, right? I mean, you have like 6 dinosaur types or whatever it is. I mean, it's like, it's ridiculous. It's not enough to support an ecosystem. And you'd want to go all the way in of like all the ways that they, sure,
even
they
vegetation,
eat.
right?
Exactly. It's like they eat the vegetation and then they crap it out. So more vegetation grows. Like, I mean, just, you just want to go all the way with it, and of course the T-Rexes eat the vegetarians, and I don't know. You could kind of
The other thing that isn't exactly this, but I had because we were talking about my desire to want to remake this game, is that I haven't had a chance to look up yet. Obviously, easy enough to do, but it's a hard game to play because it's not readily available. Like we had to jump through some hoops to get it, and I didn't even quite get it to play the best I could have. It was very janked together. But I wonder if there's a speedrunning community around this game.
Oh wow!
What is that? Because I was thinking about your box solution in the town level that I didn't even know you could do to get over that one wall into the one guy's house.
Yeah.
So can you imagine, like, what does the speedrunner do with this janky ass game? Like, what does that even look like? So I need to go out there and look and see if there's a speedrunning. I'm guessing there is not, but it feels like every game has a speedrun.
Yeah, I'm so not a speedrun guy that I don't actually even know, like,
how you find.
Yeah, what's the where do you go? I mean, like,
isn't there just like speedrunning.com or something? I feel like there's a database someplace.
I'm sure there is. I don't know it is the problem. Like, so it's like, oh, I'll just look it up, and I'm like, oh, I don't know what to look up. I guess I could do speedrun Trespasser, see if there's anybody's. That's one word. Speedrun. It is speedrun.com. Trespasser. Okay. Trespasser leaderboards. We're not going to get to another email. Let's see here. The speedrun, 35 minutes and 12 seconds, 5 years ago. This is wide open, Tim. You can
can do it. Wow, 35 minutes. Interesting. The funny thing is there's so much just shoe leather. You're just slogging.
Yeah.
I wonder if people have found some physics tricks to throw the player faster or something.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that typically is the whole thing with a with a speed
Interesting.
run.
Okay, I'm going to watch some videos and see if there's
apparently something. That's like with Half-Life 2. What's the game thing? The podcast that David Walensky and Pippin Bart have. They actually did a whole season about speedrunning, which was
that's right.
Which is wild. And one of them I think was Half-Life or Half-Life 2, and a lot of it is like there's this weird thing if you back up in just the right way and hit jump at the right time, you build up this weird momentum because there's just some error somewhere in the math. And so you end up being able to do these. I mean, I can remember seeing crazy videos like, okay, if I just do this at the right place, then I can shoot up through this, missing spot in the polygons in the ceiling. And now I'm above the wall and I can run through to the end of the level, type of stuff, where it's like, oh, okay. Like, how do you find that? The answer is I don't find that. I don't have that kind of time. Like, no.
Well, and then there's different speed running criteria, right? There's ones with cheats and ones without cheats.
Yeah, any percent tool assisted and complete and whatever. I don't know what a complete run of
no bugs or yes bugs or something.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So,
All right. Well, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, you've laid out.
I got to beat the record.
You got to beat the record of 35 minutes set 5 years ago. It's clearly a hot commodity. A lot of people trying to beat that 35 minutes and 12 seconds. Good luck to you, sir. All right, yeah, we're going to call it there because we're almost at an hour and 15 minutes. So we'll just go ahead here. You can shoot us more emails like those. We have a bunch to catch up on, so we will be trying to keep up over the next few weeks. Sorry that we haven't gotten yours sooner. You can send those to devgameclub@gmail.com. We also love your emails and reviews. I get all the Apple ones. Haven't seen one in a while. If you are reviewing us somewhere else, point us in that direction or send it in. We love to read those things on the air. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com, on Twitter at devgameclub, or twitching at twitch.tv/
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
I know you have streamed on half the Mondays this year, which good on you, sir. You may not have made that initial resolution stick, but you did. Are you still working on Control? Is that?
Oh yeah, I'm doing the DLC, and I think I'm just about done with the foundation, so I can get to the. My point of this is to get to the Alan Wake DLC so that I can play Alan Wake 2. But the foundation was a bit of a slog. I'm not gonna be.
Yeah, I remember that being true. Well, good luck.
I think
when you get to Alan Wake 2, because I may jump.
You can watch the VOD; it's up now. So yeah,
I may play that too. We also have a fan Discord, as we alluded to earlier. There's a link for that in the show notes. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and our logo, that Discord, our merch store, by Mark Garcia. Have fun drag selecting your formations this week, and good night.
Good night.